This is the third and final workout of your basic beginner program. Day 3. Here we go. We're starting with an overhead press, but first we're going to show you what not to do. What we don't want you to do is lean too far back and using your lower back as leverage. That can cause herniated discs and even end plate fractures. We do not want that. Plus, it's also limiting the actual usage of your shoulders, and we want to use those more than anything else here. So this is how we do it properly. I'm pressing vertically, completely straight up, and my joints are stacked. If you take a look at my ankle, my knee, my hips, my shoulders, they're all one straight line. And I'm pressing right in the air. What you want to do is actually brace your abs. So squeeze your abs as you press up. You want to squeeze your glutes together too so that you rotate your pelvis and grip the floor with your feet. So it's a stable base that you're pressing off of, right to the ceiling. That last cue is one of my favorites. If you really pretend on accelerating the weight towards the ceiling, you'll actually get better recruitment of your shoulders and your triceps. Now, if this is your first time or one of your first times doing this, you may not have paid so much attention to your abs. You might just be trying to get the weight up however you can. So whether you feel your lower back or not, you should be really aware of still bracing the abs. And of course, like we said before, one of the main cues to knowing that you're bracing your abs properly is if you pretend like someone's going to kick you right in the gut. What are you going to do? You're going to brace and squeeze your abs so that you protect your organs beneath it. Now again, we still want a nice and controlled tempo. And there's many different ways to get the weights up, but because these weights are light for me, I kind of just curl them up and then press them. But if the weights are heavier, you actually might want to do a little clean exercise to get it from the ground to up in the shoulder rack position before you press. So this is set 2, guys. Let's get it going. Again, anywhere between 8 and 15 reps. Sticking with the good form, vertically pressing. You'll notice here that my hands are in what you call a neutral grip with the dumbbells. Now you can also do a grip where your palms are facing in front of you and the dumbbells are turned into what's called the frontal plane. Now that activates a little bit more of the anterior delts, the front deltoid muscle. However, it's also generally worse on the shoulders. I don't mean to say worse as in it's bad. You can do them completely fine without any issues, but if you tend to suffer from any sort of shoulder issues in the past, or if you have shoulder impingement, holding the dumbbells that way has a higher likelihood of you feeling irritation in those shoulders. So if that's the case, you're better off doing the neutral grip that I'm doing in this demonstration, and it's a lot less stressful on the shoulders, and it aligns better with the joints, thus decreasing the likelihood of any sort of shoulder impingement or irritation. If your shoulders are still hurting you or bothering you while you're doing this version of the movement that I'm demonstrating with the neutral grip, I would just skip this exercise, and instead you can replace it with one of the other pressing movements that we did. A horizontal press like a push-up in day 2 or a floor press in day 1 is a lot less stressful on the shoulder, so I urge that you give that a try first. But if you can do this exercise and you have no problems or no pain with it other than just the burn of the muscles after doing so many reps, then you got to stick with this exercise. This is the last set. Keep the breathing right. Remember, you're always exhaling when you're exerting the most force. So this is on the way up. And then you can have a quick inhale and re-brace when you're at the bottom before you press up. Remember, form over everything. So now it's the last couple reps. If you feel like you can't do anymore, just take a couple seconds in between and try and get 1 or 2 more reps. Otherwise, you can just cut the set. Good job on this first exercise. Next up, we've got frog squats. So the way that we do these is we hold a dumbbell in between both hands we lock our arms out so that our triceps are working by actually straightening our arms. And then you just squat right down. So you'll notice I'm bending my knees and my hips together. I'm actually locking my lats in. So what that means is that you try and pinch your armpits in between your arm and your ribs. And we're doing a full range of motion here so that the dumbbell actually hits the ground. Now, if you want to make these harder, you can actually elevate your feet, maybe put a plate on each side, and then what you actually do is you'll squat a little bit lower, and the weight will touch the ground instead of the plates, therefore giving you an extra inch or two of work to do. And again, I'm keeping the back straight, so take a look at my lower back. I'm not rounding over, and I'm not hyperextending and arching backwards at all either. My knees pretty much just go right to the tip of my toes. Now that doesn't matter too much, but again, if you ever suffer from any sort of knee pain, usually the further forward your knees go, especially if they go a couple inches past your toes, you'll start to notice a lot more stress and tension and maybe even irritation or pain on the front of your knee joint, right at the kneecap. If you're a little more advanced, you can actually target different muscle groups and different muscles more than others. So if you really want to get the quads going and you don't have any issues with your knees, you can actually shift a little forward. So it's called Anterior Translation, which just means that your knees are more forward past the toes if you want to get the quads a little more. Or you can go in the opposite direction and sit your butt back even more as much as you can and hinge over so that your torso is almost parallel, and that almost turns this exercise into a bit of a deadlift where you're also loading the glutes and the hamstrings a little more, evening it out with the quads as well. So take the rest of your rest break and just think about how that felt. Did you feel it in the right places? Did it bother you at all? Was it hard? Was it easy? Do you think you can do more weight, less weight, more reps, less reps? Or do you think you can cut the rest time down significantly? Now remember, you want to catch your breath. You really want to breathe deep. Deep breathing really allows the oxygen to flow and get taken up by the muscles, thus replenishing your energy so that you're ready to go for your next set. All right, let's do it. So same rules apply here. We're going full range of motion. If you want to make it harder, again, you can elevate your feet, but nothing in the middle so that the dumbbell has lower to go. Or you can actually hold the dumbbell sideways so that it has a bigger range of motion before the weight actually touches the ground, therefore making it a little bit harder. We're just going to keep pumping this out. Now, if you can, you also want to thrust your hips forward at the top. For me, I can't get a full lockout because my hips end up thrusting into the dumbbell. However, I'm doing as good as I can, and at the same point, I'm focusing on getting the quads going while I'm still bracing the abs. Alright, you've got 30 seconds before your last set. Now, I'm not going to say too much here, I'll just let you rest, but again, focus on working the right muscles, getting the right form, bracing the abs, focusing on the legs, and breathing between reps. This is the last set, so let's get it done right. So you might feel the burn, you might feel like it's hard, you might feel like you're going out of breath. Just give it everything that you have for this last set, and you can cut it early if you need. Obviously, we always say this, it's important that you do proper reps. So if you can't keep up the right form and you're cheating to get a couple extra reps, just cut the set there. You've clearly worked hard enough so that it has some sort of effect on your body if you're going to near failure. But if you can keep going, dig deep down and keep focusing and keep pushing. It's also very important that you push yourself as much as you can as long as the form is good. So that's not an excuse to just cut the set. I still want you to give it your all. Okay, so next up we've got a different version of bent over rows, different than what we did on the first day. Now it may look the same, and essentially it's very similar. The main difference is that we're changing the grip. We were doing a neutral grip before, kind of like how we were doing the overhead press earlier in this workout. And now we're doing a palms facing us grip. That's going to target a little more of the upper back and a bit less of the biceps. Now a neutral grip is usually a little easier because the biceps will help out a little bit. It's always good to get a different variation of the same movement. Works similar muscles in the same muscle group, but different percentages of each one. So same rules apply here as on day one. You bend over, you keep a straight back. Now in this scenario, I could even force my chest up more and actually have a slight arch. But right now my back is pretty straight. It actually looks like it's a little bent over and a little rounded. That's not really what you usually want, but in this case, I'm bracing my abs hard and I do have my chest up a bit. You can just tell that my spinal erectors are definitely activated a little bit. One of the most important aspects to this exercise is just getting into a comfortable position that doesn't hurt your back. So for me, having a straight back where I'm bracing my abs slightly pulls me a little bit rounded, but at the same time it really allows me to focus on rowing with a really stable, pain-free base. Some people are the opposite. Some people get really arched, really extended, and it can still row with a big range of motion. So I want you to pay attention to something here. Right as the video starts, you'll notice that when I pick the weights up, I'm actually pretty rounded. So imagine that that is a position that we usually don't want you to be in for this exercise. Right there. You'll notice that it looked like I was almost a little bit hunchbacked. So usually that's not what you want. That compresses the vertebral discs, anterior side or the front side of the body. And doing that actually pushes the disc fluid out towards the back side, the posterior side of the body. And doing that over and over under load can actually cause a herniation. Now, fortunately, this is not a super heavy weight. This is meant to be more a light to moderate weight, but you still want to pay attention to your form because we don't want you getting injured. Alright, there's one last set of these to go. So again, focus, pay attention. If there's anything that is bothering you, any sort of pain, irritation, or something you just don't get how to do right, you might not think you're doing it right because you can't feel what you're supposed to feel, reach out to one of us at Clearcut Fitness. Personal training and customization is what we do best. You can book a session with one of us online, and we can help fix your issue or come up with an alternative exercise that suits you better. And if you're feeling this right, you're feeling it in your back, your lats, your mid-back, your abs even, because it's holding you in that position, then you're doing it right, and keep it up, you're doing awesome. Let's get ready for the last set. Now, one cue that I mentioned in day one is that not only do we want your torso and your back to be straight, but you also want to remain bent over. So a common mistake with beginners is that as they're doing their set, every rep and every rep, their torso actually starts getting more and more upright every single rep. Now, we don't want that because then by the end of it, you'll be doing shrugs instead of rows. So make sure that your abs are engaged and holding you down into that position so you can row and use the back muscles properly. Next up is one of my favorite exercises. It is a split squat. Now we're going to do split squats with a dumbbell in your hands in the goblet position, but if it's too easy, you can hold one dumbbell in each arm and have your arms down by your side on both sides of the body. We're going to go over what I don't want you doing. So here's an example of lunging too far forward and your knees really going over your toes. That usually causes a lot more tension and stress on the front of the kneecap. If you ever suffer from knee pain, this might make it worse or irritate it. Now this is what it looks like if your feet are too close together, and this is what it looks like if your legs are too far apart and leaning too far backwards. This is a proper rep. Alright, so let's get into it. Let's do some proper split squats. So I grab the dumbbell here in the goblet position. Again, you can also make it harder and have two dumbbells, one in each hand, down by each leg. And you'll notice that both my knees are bending at 90-degree angles. So if your feet are too close together, then you'll notice you'll both be bending your knees too much. It'll feel really uncomfortable and really weird, also harder to balance. And if your feet and legs are too wide apart, then you'll feel a big stretch in your rear hip flexor, the hip flexor of your rear leg. And if you were to look in a mirror while you're doing this, you'll actually see that you're not 90-degree angles on both knees. Your back leg will be almost straight. So we don't want that. Now you can take a quick little break between legs because even though we're focusing on one leg at a time, the back leg will still do some work. So before you switch sides and start working out a muscle that's already a little bit tired and been a little bit used, it's totally fine to take a 10 to even 30-second break in between each side and regroup. Now you'll also notice that with a goblet version of this split squat, I'm keeping a pretty upright torso. If you're doing the version where you're holding a dumbbell in each hand down by your sides, that is likely going to have you a little more hinged over, a little more of a diagonal angle where your body's a little bit forward and you're actually sitting deep back into the hips. You might even feel your glutes and your hamstrings loaded more than your quads when you do it like that. I've got an interesting little tip for you guys here. So there is a difference between a split squat and a lunge, although they look very similar. A lunge actually has some sort of forwards or backwards or lateral movement. So lunging forward from a complete standstill, something like that. Whereas a split squat is just straight down and straight up. Lunges, I would consider lunges more of an intermediate movement than a beginner because it requires a lot more balance, especially when you're stepping outwards or stepping backwards. So to start, we like to do a single leg exercise to get you going on that balance and that stability, but with a split squat instead of a lunge. You can also load split squats usually heavier than a lunge, so it's also good in the beginning. So here's our next set. Again, this is proper, both knees bending at 90 degrees. If that's not the case, it means your feet are either too close together or too far apart. Same example as I was saying earlier. Look at my back leg there. My knee is also bending at 90 degrees. If all of a sudden it looks like my back leg is straight at the bottom, then it means that you're going to feel a big stretch in the hip flexor. It's probably a little dangerous as well because there's a lot of tension there, and it means that you're not doing the right form. So again, you can take a quick little break between sides. You can take longer than I took if you want. I took about 10 seconds here. But again, this is relatively light for me. I'm just pumping out reps here. Now keep the breathing going as usual. Exhale on the way up, and you can either inhale on the way down or inhale at the very top when you haven't moved yet. Inhale, brace, and then exhale on the way back up again. Alright, good stuff. We've got one more set of these. So if you've kept up so far, you're doing an awesome job. Keep up the good work, keep up the focus, and remember, listen to your body during these workouts. If you feel like something is way too hard and you can't complete every single set, then scale it back a little bit. Either give yourself a little more rest or take a few reps off of the set. And conversely, if this is too easy, you can add weight if you have more weight, or add reps, or get right into one of our more intermediate or advanced programs. Now again, this is just showing you an example of what not to do. Lunging too far forward to the point where my heel is off. Once the heel is off, it means that so much more tension is in the ankle and the knee joint, which is not what we want. And then this is leaning too far backwards as well, which is no good. And again, here is a solid split squat rep. Now let's do it, guys. Last set. Last but not least is one of my favorite core exercises. It's called ASLR, stands for active straight leg raise, or you can call it assisted straight leg raise. So this version that you see here is actually an active straight leg raise where it's resisted. So I'm actually holding, right now it's a weight plate, but you can do it with a dumbbell holding straight up in the air. What you do is hold one leg up as the other leg goes down and up. And what I'm going to show you in a second is an easier way to do it. So it's actually a pretty difficult exercise, and for beginners, it's best to start off assisted. And we can do that in a couple ways. One way is by using a resistance band to actually pull your leg up and help you hold it. This is a bit easier because instead of your abs having to hold up both legs, they only have to hold up the one that you're raising. This is one of my favorite abdominal exercises. It's called the assisted straight leg raise. We're also going to show you the unassisted straight leg raise. This exercise is great for a few reasons. The first is that it really activates the abs and gets the core going. The second is because it helps cure anybody who has seriously tight hamstrings. You see, a lot of the issue with people who have tight hamstrings is that it's not so much that the muscle itself is tight and you need to stretch it, it's that your core is super weak and your pelvis gets pulled out of place. Now, there are a few reasons why it's so good for helping your hamstrings, but one of the main ones is because doing a leg raise one leg at a time allows your hips to be set in the right position. If you do a core exercise with both legs at the same time, your pelvis can rotate a lot, which can decrease abdominal activation and throw your hips out of whack. But when you have a split stance where one leg is up, it holds your pelvis in a position a little bit better, and then the other leg can dynamically move up and down while the hip is still in the right position. That's why some people who have low back pain will do an ab exercise and still feel it in their back, because they're compensating and they're rotating their hips in the wrong way. Whereas if you do it one leg at a time, you're able to hold the position of the hips in a much more stable position while you're still activating your abs. Now, I find that doing it resisted actually allows people to feel the abs more. I'm not quite sure if it's harder or not, but you have to force your abs, your lats, all your stabilizer muscles to work harder to hold that weight up. And in doing so, that automatically gets your abs going and therefore setting your hips in the proper position to get that leg up. Now, also, if it's too hard, or if doing the band was too easy and this is too hard, somewhere in the middle would be just doing a smaller range of motion. So I'm going all the way because I can handle it, but there was a time where I probably went maybe 45 degrees down before I started to feel my hips rotate and my lower back take over. The whole point of this is that it's an ab exercise, so you want to make sure that you're doing it right. You guys have You have one set left in the entire workout and program. So what I want you to think of is getting maximum abdominal activation here. Make sure that they're working hard. One way to do that is by imagining pinning your rib cage down to your hips. Your abs attach from your rib cage down to your hips, so contracting them pulls your ribs down to your hips. Also, think of what I've said with other ab exercises before too. Pretend like someone's going to kick you in the stomach, you're going to brace and hold for impact. That is activating the abs the way that we want. Now, while they're activated, you don't want to let go because you're going to be thinking of moving that leg up and down and working hard to hold the other leg up in the air. Sometimes when you have too many cues thrown at you at once, it's easy to forget one of them. So if you're going to focus on anything the most, it's going to be squeezing those abs, bracing them, and keeping the legs straight. If the knees bend too much, then all of a sudden your hip flexors will take over. We don't want that. Again, this is a core exercise that's meant to stabilize the hips and help your hamstrings. We're going for about 5 to 8 reps each side here as well.